Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem video. This is a game that I played this week at the local club. It's the second game I played in the same night. We played two games in one night, once where I had the black pieces and once where I had the white pieces against the same opponent. And each game was game in an hour instead of our usual setup of having a single game played per evening, and the game takes 2 hours. You get 2 hours for each side. The game actually lasts for 3 to 4 hours typically. So there's a game in an hour with 5-second delay, and that time factor actually becomes an issue later on in the game. But mostly I wanted to show this game in order to talk about some issues related to planning and strategy in the middle game, which is a video I did recently on the middle game, so I can talk about some of those concepts in a real game here. So anyway, I had the white pieces. I start off with d4. My opponent replied knight f6. I go c4, and here she goes g6. So we get into a King's Indian defense, although at this point it could still be a Grinfeld. So I continue in main line, knight c3, bishop g7, e4. So now with e4, I've ruled out the Grinfeld because d5 is no longer a good move. But it's clear that black was aiming for a King's Indian defense all along, so d6 is the main move. And here I play this sideline g3. So this was a popular way of playing back at the time of the 1953 Zurich tournament, and so I saw a number of examples of this, and I'm just trying to learn how to play this setup. It's a way of hopefully surprising my opponent a little bit with a line they're not familiar with, and also a way of avoiding some of the sharpest lines where white comes under a really dangerous kingside attack. So play continues with knight bd7, I go bishop g2, and e5, typical King's Indian moves. And now d5 would be a standard response here, but I wasn't quite sure in this position whether I wanted to play d5 just yet, and it's certainly not forced. I can defend it, and I do. I play knight ge2, keeping the knight out of the way of the bishop and defending this pawn. So if black takes, I take back with a knight, and I'll have a structure that resembles a little bit the Maroczy bind, although black won't have a Sicilian setup. The e pawn will be missing instead of the c pawn. So, but it'll be somewhat similar to a Maroczy bind. Anyway, black elects not to do that, but just castle, knight castle, and now rook e8 is played. And this that rook e8 is a fine move here, but other ways of playing it, the more common ways of playing it, are with c6 and with e takes d4. So it is definitely an idea here to just exchange and go for this. You get what black gets. He has to suffer a little bit. In this case, she has to suffer a little bit against the Maroczy bind, but this diagonal opens up for the dark-squared bishop, so there is some logic to taking there. Okay, but rook e1 is a fine move too. And now I play a move which is not good, objectively speaking. I had a particular idea in mind, and the reason it's not good, I guess this is one point here is that it illustrates some of the things that are difficult about planning. So you have a plan and you implement it. I played this move f4 with the plan of taking on d5 at a time when black on e5, when black would be obliged to take back with a pawn. And then I was planning to push my d pawn forward and get some space this way, and maybe even a passed pawn on the d file. So that was my plan, and what I didn't really take into account, or I thought it was still an option to take, but I didn't think it was that dangerous. But the chess engine says that that's what black should do in this circumstance: is take the d pawn here, challenge my setup, and put this knight on c5, because this exchange opened up this square for the knight. That was one advantage of keeping that pawn on d4, was protecting that square. So now that square is vacated, the knight can hop in there, and my e-pawn is under attack. I have to defend it. So I've got bishop, knight, and rook defending it, but black has two knights and a rook attacking it. And in addition, this bishop is looking out indirectly at my knight. And the whole setup, if we can erase the arrows now, is a bit fragile, it seems. And actually the chess engine prefers black in this position. Now, during the game, I was looking ahead, and I saw this as a possibility. I said, well, I'd be willing to play this as white because it looks like I have a little more space. And, sometimes when you have a big center, you have to suffer a little bit protecting it. It's just hard to say that this is going to be an effective way of playing or not, if I'm going to be able to defend it and hold on to it. But looking at it after the fact and with the help of a chess engine, it seems like black is doing pretty well here. So there's actually an advantage to black in this position. The engine wants to just continue with c6. Yeah, also, that's kind of funny too. c6 is the move you're typically trying to provoke because you want to, you're threatening to come with the knight to d5, so you provoke c6, and then that weakens the d6 pawn. So I guess until, maybe even now, even though the chess engine has told me this is not a good position, I guess I would still be willing to play this and go for that long-term pressure on the d-pawn and just see how it works out. But it's interesting that from the perspective of the chess engine, this is good for black. Okay, so let's go back to the game. After I played f4, my opponent replied in an interesting way with c5. So I continued with my plan, and this is part 2 of that planning and strategy question. I had seen ahead a little bit, so I did the exchange. She took back, and I pushed on with the pawn. And the chess engine likes this, so this is a correct plan according to the chess engine. I've got this passed pawn. This is the advantages that I saw were that I had this passed pawn, which is protected, so that's good for the endgame. I have more space with this advanced pawn triangle, and it's not too hard to defend, so I didn't feel like this was going to come under attack, whereas the other setup we were looking for, it seemed like my pawns were a bit fragile and had to be supported. Here they seem pretty solid. But there is a downside to this structure, and when I was looking ahead, I had a little trouble making that decision whether I should go ahead with the exchange or not. Eventually I decided to play this way, but the downside is this. Look at the bishop. It's looking at these pawns. The knight is looking at these pawns. My pieces don't have a lot of good squares. This knight doesn't have many squares to go to either. It's stumbling, it's hitting the other knight or coming out here. All those good squares seem to be taken. So it seems like even though I have some static advantages, there are some disadvantages here for white. I guess there is one good plan here for piece play with knight coming to b5. That looks interesting. But that can also be controlled with the a6 move. So it wasn't entirely clear before I went into this that this was going to be so easy. But eventually I convinced myself that, I could hold on to the static advantage and the position would be slow enough that I would have time to maneuver my pieces around and get them to good squares. And that pretty much turned out to be the case. So black replied here with knight b6, hitting my c-pawn. I played b3. So we get some normal moves here, bishop d7, bishop d2, getting the pieces developed. And now black goes for this interesting maneuver. Black has some plans here too. Putting this knight on a good square, blockading my passed pawn. So good play here. I go queen c1. And this is a plan to get my bishop onto the g5 square. I'm not... sometimes when you see this battery, you think the idea is to trade off the pawn on the bishop rather on g7, which is protecting the king over here and is sometimes a good piece. But in this particular case, that bishop is just looking at a pawn right now, so it's not doing a whole lot. So I'm not eager to to trade it. It's just that in this position, if I play the bishop there immediately, I'm going to get hit with this h6 move, and then I have to either retreat or trade. And I wasn't sure I wanted to trade just yet. So queen c1, preparing bishop g5, knight d6, and then I get the bishop move in. So that plan worked out okay. And now b5. Black is going for counterplay on the queen side, very logical play. And now actually threatening to win a pawn on b4, c4 here. So I'm pretty much forced to take. And you have to look at this. I take knight takes, bishop takes. The bishop is going to end up here, and there's going to be a little bit of a skewer. But I realized I could play rook f2 to defend the knight and unpin it. So that's how the game went. And so that was a bit of a small defensive plan, looking ahead to the end of the sequence and figuring out what the move is to hold on to things. And now queen b6 was played. And now I went for a bit of a controversial decision. The chess engine just wants to kind of sit on this position. Typical response of a chess engine when it's got a space advantage but it doesn't have any active plan. So it wants to play moves like h3, bishop to f3, queen to d2, that kind of thing. So these are just little improving moves. This bishop, well, actually, that's one of the advantages of getting rid of this knight. So let's go back to my plan. I didn't play that. I took the knight right away. I was thinking with this rook and the knight, I might get some pressure. Rook and the bishop, I might get some pressure against the knight. But black just unpinned the knight, so there's no way to increase the pressure. And I wanted to be able to bring my pieces out to the dark squares here. And I didn't want to have to worry about the knight hopping in to g4. So I decided just to trade off that knight and leave black with this dark squared bishop, which I hoped would not be too useful. But well, as I said, the engine doesn't like that plan particularly, and doesn't like this follow-up queen e3. But that was my idea. I get rid of the knight so I can play my queen to e3, and if this pawn ever comes forward, I was going to just trade queens and then take here. But well, an interesting move was played here, bishop to e7. And now I noticed there is this lineup of my pieces along this diagonal. And so this move c4 followed by bishop to c5 is a big threat in this position. So I started to unwind things off of the diagonal and played the move king h1. The chess engine, by the way, is completely unafraid and just wants to play knight to c3 here, ignoring that threat. But I guess by exchanging the bishop, the queen can be pulled away from that diagonal. Anyway, interesting way to play. I went king h1 to get off the diagonal. Black pushed on with c4, and I went queen f3. So this was one of my ideas, just get a little pressure on the f-pawn here, buy time to unwind from this lineup of pieces along the diagonal. So f6 was played, and then I went rook to d1. So I thought this was an interesting move. It comes with a threat. I'm trying to push this pawn forward and distract the bishop. Obviously the queen can't take the pawn, but if the bishop takes the pawn, then I can come in here with my queen, take on f6, threaten the bishop, and threaten to start harassing the black king. So I think that would be pretty fatal. So black takes on b3, and I thought I couldn't quite get away with that move just yet, so I take back. And then she plays rook to f8, defending this pawn. So now this idea of pushing on with d6 no longer has any particular appeal. So at this point I play bishop to h3, just trying to get this bishop out to a more active diagonal. Bishop to c5 was played here, hitting my rook. And I make a nice move here. Before moving the rook, yeah, this is one of those things about not always responding to your opponent's threats. I throw in this check, which I can get away with. And the king moves. The king went to g7. And that was, I mean, one of the things the bishop on h3 was doing was preventing this f-pawn from coming forward, which is one of those moves that black might like to play at some point to undermine my center. But the bishop also, if that happens, might get stuck behind that wall of pawns. It's a danger. So I get the bishop out in front of the pawns, and it's controlling some key squares, particularly the c8 square turns out to be very useful, as well as controlling some squares towards black's king. So all this is looking pretty good for white at this point. So now after the king moves, I move my rook to the side because I still want to be able to take back the knight. Here she decides to trade off. And then rook a, d8. And now we're into this interesting phase of the game where the opposite colored bishops really make a difference. So I have a real kind of domination of the light squares. Look at all of my pieces, the queens, all of these pawns, the bishop. They're all on light squares, the king. The only pieces I have on dark squares are these two pawns over here. And similarly, all of black's pieces have migrated to the dark squares. And so this is a light versus dark battle at this point. And I think I just have a slightly better distribution of squares. The material is still even, but actually white has quite an advantage at this point. So I start with rook c1. This is how I'm planning to take advantage of my light square controls. I can just pile up on the c file here and penetrate. And this bishop can't really be supported because the rook can't come over to c8. She tries rook d6 here, and then I line up with the other rook to c2. And now she plays bishop to a3. So getting away from the rooks, which the bishop was about to be lost, and also hitting my rook. But I have time to throw in this check once again, a move with tempo. King has to go back to h8. It gets mated, I think, pretty quickly if it comes forward to h6. And then rook to c2, getting the rook out of way of the bishop. So here, my opponent drops her rook back to d8, and I am coming up with a plan. This is the maybe the third or fourth plan I'm trying to come up with during this game. And here, obviously, the overall strategy is just mating the king. You know, how do you get to the king? And at first, I was thinking, oh, queen here to here, so that I can pile up on the h7 pawn. And if this pawn moves forward, then these pawns become weak. I can go after them. So that was looking pretty good to me. But when I move my queen to, when I do this first move with queen to g4, it leaves this pawn unprotected, and the queen can come in and take that pawn and then get to the back rank here and start delivering some checks. So there's some counterplay that goes on, and so I was unhappy with that. And so I came up with what I thought at the time. I thought at the time it was a really good plan. I said I need a way to get over there and not lose any of my my queenside pawns here, which are sort of helping keep black's pieces away from my king. And so I came up with the idea of playing this move g4. And this move is a big mistake. Not a huge mistake. I still keep an advantage. So if you want to, maybe you can think about what I neglected in my thinking process when I played that g4 move. So you can pause the video and think, what is black's reply after I play g4? Okay, so the fault in my thinking process was that I wasn't considering my opponent's best response. So if we back up 1 second, my opponent's previous move was to drop the rook back. This rook on d6 just went back to d8. And I didn't really think much about it. But it does one key thing, and after I move my pawn forward to g4, that key thing is revealed. The bishop can now use this d6 square, and it comes in and harasses my rook. And this is very unfortunate. It means I don't have time to play my intended move, queen to h3 here, doubling up on the pawn, because this rook is under attack. So that is the flaw in my thinking. And the other point about this position is that, in fact, there is one really good move that white has here. So if you want to put on your tactics hat, why don't you see if you can find the best move for white in this position, and pause the video and think about it. This maybe I think it's not too hard to find now that I've told you there's a tactic there. Why don't you just look at it for a while and see if you can figure it out, and pause the video. Okay, I'm going to give the answer away now. There's a killer move here, and it's just winning for white. And that is the move bishop to f5. And the first point is that if the bishop is taken, the queen can come over here, and now there's that threat on h7, and there's no way for black to stop. The rooks can't be supported on the 7th rank, so I'm just crashing through at that point. So let's show this. Bishop to f5. And then g takes f5, g takes f5, and queen to h5. And see, I just have complete control of that 7th rank. The rooks can't stop it, and there's no piece that can come over here and defend. So this is just winning for white. So the bishop on f5 can't be taken. And now there's another really cute point. The best defensive move here is rook to g8, trying to defend some squares around the king. And then, let's see, the follow-up is rook to c6, hitting the queen. Queen gets out of the way. Queen comes forward to b4, threatening to come in here and deliver some checks. And now the sacrifice. Rook takes h7 check. King takes, pretty much the only move. I think that is the only legal move. And now the key, the punchline, queen to h5 check. And now you see the other point of bishop to f5. It's pinning that g6 pawn. So a very nice tactic there, and that sequence would win for white. So I would have won the game if I had spotted that bishop f5 move. But at this point, well, we've been playing for 32 moves. We're probably both a little low on our clocks. And anyway, I played this move, g4, thinking it was a good move, but neglecting to account for this defensive move, bishop d6. And now my advantage has kind of dropped. I have a slight advantage, but nothing great. And in fact, the fact that we have opposite colored bishops is going to lend kind of a drawish character to the position, because we can't, those pieces don't come into conflict with each other. So anyway, I brought my rook in to c6 to chase the queen away. And let's see, at this point she played queen to b4, but actually I think it's even if she just takes the rook. It's just the queen for 2 rooks. I take back, bishop takes, and it's just hard for me to make progress now, and the engine rates this is about even. So that would have been a way to escape with the draw. Anyway, she played queen to b4 here, and I went in with rook takes h7. So I've grabbed a pawn. I needed to get my rook away from the bishop. It wasn't about grabbing the pawn. It was about finding a way to keep my rook on the 7th rank, although the pawn may turn out to be useful in the endgame. Anyway, she comes in with a check. I had calculated this part, so I think I'm okay. King and g2, queen to d2 check, and then I block with my queen to f2. And here, black was just critically low on time. She needs to retreat the queen rather than trade. And it's still a game that would continue with white only being slightly better and probably high probability of a draw. So it could go something like queen to d3. I might play queen to cancel that. Queen to c2, trying to force a trade and activate my queen, and then queen to e3, avoiding the trade and trying to keep the queen active. And it's like I said, in this position, white's got a slight edge, but it would be a long game. Anyway, just being short on time, she went for the trade. She took here, and now this is a winning game for white. So really, it was the time was a critical factor at the end that caused that. So after the exchange here, the rest of the game went like this: rook f to e8. I just start bringing my king in. Rook to e7. The reason why it's an easy win now is because I have this outside passed pawn, and I'm quick enough to defend it. It's not with my king. If she'd attacked immediately with the rook, I would have been able to bring a rook back to defend it. So this pawn is going to be saved, and I'm going to use the king to bring it forward, and that's the strategy at this point. So rook to e7, trying to trade off, and I went ahead and accepted the trade. This is all making it easier for me to win. If you're in time trouble, the trades also make it easier for you to calculate. So sometimes the player in time trouble is inclined to trade. So the king comes forward. This rook went to b8, and I just pushed forward with d6. This is a clever, cancel that. This pawn. I pushed this pawn forward. This is a clever little tactic. If black takes the pawn, then king here attacks the rook, and this bishop is under attack, so 2 pieces are hanging. So taking the pawn, even though it's with check, is not a good idea. So she still had enough time to find the best move here, rook to d8, pinning the pawn. So I push on with d7, and she tries to bring the king over. I walk my king up, and then the king can't really get any closer. I'm controlling all the light squares here, and the dark squared bishop is in the way, and now I can just start pushing this pawn forward. The king moves around a little bit, but after a few more moves, let's see, I cancel that. I played rook c8 here. She went king g5, but then she'd run out of time, so she lost on time here. But also, this is just a win. There's no stopping this pawn from becoming a queen. So in the end, I did have a winning position, but I was helped a lot by the time situation. Okay, that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave any comments that you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.